So you've made it. You've created a product that actually resonates. Early on, it's all sharp intuition and direct connection. You even know every customer by name, but as your creation expands, that direct line of communication fades. The clear signal of what users want starts getting lost in the noise. You're left trying to scale a feeling, attempting to maintain that personal touch when you can no longer look your customers in the eye. Today, you'll explore the analytical systems that bridge the gap between human intuition and massive scale. You'll learn to look past surface-level numbers and see the true mechanics of why people stay, why they leave, and what makes them advocate for what you've built. These concepts will help you shift from reacting to problems to deliberately shaping growth, with a clearer view of product health and where to steer next. Let's jump in. Take a moment to imagine you have a friend who's spent 7 intense years training to become a master sommelier. Only a few hundred people in the world reach this level of expertise. When she's working the floor of a restaurant, she possesses a distinct superpower. She can look at your clothes, listen to the cadence of your voice, gauge your mood, and recommend the perfect bottle of wine before you even realize what you want. It feels like magic because she understands the customer so deeply, but here's the tragic part. When this same expert tries to sell wine online, that superpower vanishes. The intuitive connection is severed by the screen, and she can no longer read the room. This is the exact struggle you face when growing a product. In the early days, you operate on founder's intuition, a gut sense of who your users are. But as you scale, you lose that intimacy. You can't look every user in the eye. To survive, you have to replace that lost intuition with data. And this brings us to the concept of a North Star metric, a single measure that acts as your compass. A true North Star doesn't track vanity metrics like total signups or clicks, which are easily gamed, but measures the actual value delivered to the user. Think of a workplace collaboration tool. A lazy metric would count how many people signed up. But a North Star metric would be number of teams collaborating daily, because that proves people are actually getting what you promised. Now, once you have your compass, you need to verify you're building something people actually want. This is called product market fit, or PMF. And there's one ruthless way to measure it: retention. In other words, do users return after that first touch? When you plot active users over time, you create a retention curve. In a worst-case scenario, this line slopes downward until it hits 0, signaling you're losing customers faster than you can find them. But in a healthy product, something different happens. The curve dips initially, then flattens into a plateau, or even ticks upward, forming what's called a smiling curve. That smile is the heartbeat of a successful business. It means you've found a core group of users who think your product is indispensable. The problem with retention is that it's a lagging indicator. It's like driving while looking in the rearview mirror. By the time you realize users aren't returning after 6 months, it's often too late. To drive growth proactively, you need leading indicators, specific early actions that signal long-term loyalty. For a video streaming app, this might mean knowing that if a user watches more than 10 minutes in their first week, they're highly likely to stick around. Find that sweet spot, the exact moment a casual visitor becomes loyal, and you can guide everyone else toward that same path. So, now you've got your leading indicators in place. You know which early signals predict who's likely to stick around. You're probably feeling ready to hit the gas, but here's where a lot of teams get blindsided. You might watch your total user count climb month after month and assume everything's humming along beautifully. Then, 6 months later, you realize the whole thing was built on sand. The problem? Most teams treat growth like a slot machine. Feed in marketing dollars, pull the lever, get users out. What you actually need is something closer to a financial balance sheet, tracking every movement with precision. Think of it like this. A CFO would never glance at a bank balance and call it a day without knowing where every cent came from. The same logic applies to your user base. You need a ledger, and at the center of that ledger sits one deceptively simple equation. Net growth equals new users plus resurrected users, churned users. It's almost like a bucket filling with water. New users are the tap flowing in at the top. Churned users are the leak at the bottom. If you crank that tap wide open, pouring money into acquisition, the water level rises even if there's a gaping hole underneath. Your net growth looks fantastic. Everyone high fives. But the second you ease off the marketing spend, that bucket drains right out. Growth accounting forces you to stare directly at that hole, separating real momentum from growth you're simply buying. For our equation to work, every user has to land in one of 4 categories for the period you're measuring. There are the new users, touching your product for the first time. The retained users are your healthy core, who showed up last period and came back again. The churned users were previously active, but have now gone quiet. And then there's a category that often gets overlooked, the resurrected user, someone who left at some point but has circled back. That distinction matters enormously because these groups need completely different things. Some need an introduction, others need a reason to believe something's changed. Now, the accuracy of all this hinges on how you slice time. A common misstep is using static calendar months, comparing who was around on January 1st versus February 1st. Real human behavior doesn't respect those boundaries. Someone might sign up January 25th and vanish by February 5th, and a rigid monthly snapshot misses that entirely. The fix? Use rolling, overlapping windows. Compare January 1st through 30th against January 2nd through 31st. This captures the daily rhythm of your product, logging every transition, active to churned, dormant to resurrected, right when it happens. With this framework running, you stop chasing vanity metrics and can actually diagnose what's going on. Is your product genuinely growing or just burning through cash while spinning its wheels? Great, now your ledger tracks how many users are flowing in and out. But here's the catch. Who exactly are these people? Are they tourists passing through for a quick look or residents building a life within your digital walls? Growth accounting gives you the population count, but nothing about the vibrancy of the city. To understand that, you need to measure the pulse of engagement, shifting focus from the breadth of your user base to its intensity. The most immediate way to take this pulse is through stickiness, specifically the DAU-MAU ratio. This measures your product's gravitational pull by asking, of all the people who visited in the last month, what percentage showed up today? If you have 1,000 monthly users, but only 100 show up daily, your ratio sits at 10%. You've got reach, but not a habit. Push that to 50%, half your monthly audience returning every single day, and you've hit the gold standard of engagement. That's the territory of social giants and communication tools. Your product has become a daily necessity. Stickiness gives you a high-level view, but it can sometimes be too blunt. It treats a user who visits once a week the same as one who visits every other day. Both are active, but their behaviors differ radically. That's where the illness framework comes in. Rather than a binary active or inactive tag, illness measures the exact number of days a user engaged in a specific window, typically the last 30 days. An L30 score of 5 tells you someone drops by occasionally. An L30 of 25 or higher reveals something entirely different. These are your power users, individuals who have woven your product into the fabric of their daily existence. Identifying these power users matters strategically because of the mathematics of the power law. Studies on consumption consistently show the top 10% of consumers account for nearly 90% of total engagement. These users are your product's heartbeat. They test the limits of your features, generate content that keeps others entertained, and serve as organic evangelists, bringing in new users. Lose them, and you lose a pillar of your ecosystem. Once you've identified this vital minority, the goal shifts from observation to replication. Become a behavioral detective, working backward to understand how they became so committed. What did these power users do in their first week that casual tourists didn't? Did they connect with 5 friends immediately? Upload a profile picture on day 1? Complete a specific tutorial? By decoding the DNA of their early journey, you can re-engineer your onboarding process to guide new users down that same path. Stop hoping people will find value and start structurally nudging them towards specific actions that lead to deep, lasting engagement. In this way, you'll clone your best customers, turning their serendipitous success into a repeatable strategy for everyone else. Even if you've cloned your power users and filled your digital city with engaged residents, a quiet threat can form. No matter how sticky your product is, entropy eventually sets in. Users drift away, credit cards expire, interests shift. If engagement is your offense, you now need a strong defense. That starts with understanding churn properly. It's tempting to see churn as one number, users leaving, but that's a dangerous oversimplification. There's the user who stops logging in, usage churn, and the user who actively cancels or payment churn. Usage churn is a slow fade, a relationship drifting apart. Payment churn is the breakup letter. The distinction matters because each requires a different response. The thing is, by the time churn shows up in your reports, the damage is done. So you need an early warning system, specific behaviors that signal a user is at risk weeks before they actually leave. In one AI chat app, analysts discovered that users who hit multiple technical errors in their first week were far more likely to abandon the platform later. Once they identified that signal, the team could intervene immediately with automatic apologies and bonus credits, repairing the relationship before the user even decided to leave. This shifts you from reactive scrambling to proactive care. Now remember what we covered about engagement in earlier sections? That same principle applies here, but in reverse. You're treating symptoms of dissatisfaction before they become fatal. Still, some users will leave. This brings us to resurrection, and this is where instinct often leads you astray. Flooding dormant users with "we miss you" emails usually backfires, pushing them to unsubscribe for good. The needy X approach rarely wins anyone back. Here's what does work: silence. Research from major tech companies, including Facebook, found something counterintuitive. Reducing notification volume actually increases user satisfaction and long-term engagement. When you send fewer alerts, each one carries more weight. Instead of generic pleas, you wait for something genuinely relevant. A close friend's photo, a product update matching their interests. You treat their attention as scarce, earning the right to invite them back rather than demanding it. Finally, all this defense connects directly to financial health. Retention protects revenue, and two metrics capture this best: gross revenue retention, or GRR, and net revenue retention, or NRR. GRR shows how much revenue you kept from existing customers, excluding upsells, a measure of baseline stability. NRR is the holy grail. It measures retained revenue, including upgrades and expansions. If your NRR exceeds 100%, your business grows purely through existing customers, even without acquiring new ones. That's the ultimate defensive engine. A customer base that doesn't just stay, but expands its value over time, compounding growth and making your business resilient to whatever comes next. So you've built your defensive moats, and your revenue engine is running smoothly. You might feel secure, but in the digital world, security is an illusion if you're standing still. The final piece of the growth puzzle comes down to velocity, moving faster than the competition, including how quickly your product responds to users. We tend to think of speed as a technical detail, something for engineers to handle, but speed is actually a retention feature. When you look at user behavior data, there's an abandonment curve that tells a brutal story. User patience doesn't decline gradually, it drops off a cliff. Research shows abandonment rates spike dramatically after just 3 seconds of delay. If your app takes 4 seconds to load, half your audience has already left before they even experienced your core value. Speed also matters in terms of how fast you learn. Here's where human intuition hits its limits. Systems are complex, and consequences of product decisions are rarely straightforward. Think about DDT. In the 1940s, it was celebrated as a miracle pesticide. Nobody realized it would run off into waterways, get eaten by fish, and concentrate in bald eagles, weakening their eggshells until they cracked during incubation. That invisible chain of cause and effect is exactly what happens with product features. Roughly 80% of ideas don't deliver expected results. What's the way through? Scalable experimentation. Testing has to become the default. The barrier is usually cost. It feels too risky to test everything. But the solution here is feature flags. They let you separate deploying code from releasing a feature. Specifically, that means you can ship the code to production, but keep it hidden from everyone except, say, a random 5% of users. Every update becomes a controlled experiment. Instead of arguing about whether a new checkout flow works, you turn it on for a small group, measure impact, and let the data decide. If something breaks, you turn it off instantly. Once you've optimized your speed and learning loops, you can move beyond linear thinking about growth. Most people picture growth as a funnel. Pour leads in at the top, customers fall out the bottom, but funnels are exhausting. The moment you stop pouring, growth stops. The most dominant companies build flywheels instead. Picture a massive, heavy wheel. The first push takes enormous effort. But as it turns, it builds momentum, eventually spinning under its own weight. In practice, this means designing systems where one stage's output fuels the next stage's input. Take the creator flywheel on video platforms. A creator posts a video that attracts a viewer. The viewer leaves a comment. That validation motivates the creator to post more. The system feeds itself. Your job as a growth leader? Find the friction points slowing things down and grease those gears. When you combine this self-sustaining momentum with a clear North Star, balanced accounting, and rapid experimentation, you build something that keeps growing on its own.